I woke up on a mountain with a sore head and a red crystal in my hand. A golden humanoid robot was sitting across from me, scanning the area with light from its eyes. Before I could process any of it, the crystal in my hand burned hot, lifted into the air on its own, and embedded itself in my forehead. That was the last thing I remembered before passing out. When I came to the next morning, the robot greeted me as its master. It told me it was an inheritance robot, designed to pass on the culture and technology of a race called the Zuzu. Since the Zuzu were extinct, its protocols had selected me as the new owner. My first reaction was to roll around on the ground and fantasize about how rich a genuine AI would make me back home. I was already mentally spending the hundreds of millions when the robot informed me that this was not Earth. It was a plane rated 10,000 times higher than Earth on whatever scale these things were measured on, and I had been transmigrated. The fantasies went away. I asked the practical questions. Its combat rating could handle lions and tigers in one punch, but anything stronger would be a problem, and it was not designed for fighting in the first place. Its real value was auxiliary. The robot fed the information directly into my head, and I understood it all at once. It had a computing chip beyond anything on Earth, blueprints for weapons from across the Zuzu's entire technological history, and a void creation ability that could manifest any of those weapons out of thin air as long as it had energy to spend. I named it 3796 after its inheritance number. Since coming up with anything better felt like effort, I told it to take a human form, and it shifted into someone roughly my build and entirely unremarkable. Then I had it scan the area. Energy was measured in units called kun, and every action it took spent some, so I kept the radius modest at 50 kilometers. It located a human settlement 5 kilometers to the west, and a fresh corpse on the way there, dead less than 9 hours. I told 3796 we would visit the corpse first. It could read memories from any brain that was not yet rotted, and I needed to know what kind of world I had landed in before I walked into a town blind. We found the body about a kilometer out. A young man, early 20s, black hair, dressed in what looked like medieval hunting clothes. I told 3796 to read him. 3796 extended a thin gold tentacle into the dead man's skull and pulled out his memories in about 10 seconds. I had it transfer everything directly into my head. The corpse had been Zhao Zhang, a young heir to a barony in a place called the Fernando Principality on the Turandot subcontinent. His fief was a small town nearby called Autumn Leaf. He had spent his life trying to cultivate a family martial art called the Thunder Ox Art, so he could promote from warrior to knight, earn the 1,000 gold coins required to keep the family's title, and not embarrass his ancestors. He had not made it to knight before dying, and his death looked suspicious. It was a workable identity. Minor aristocrats could do more or less what they wanted on their own land, which suited my purposes. I asked 3796 what disguise options were cheapest. A vial of nano shapeshifting robots cost 50 kun. A simple mask of the shapeshifter cost 1. Given that 3796 only had 34 kun in reserve and had to recharge slowly off sunlight, the choice was obvious. It pulled minerals out of the ground through its palm, condensed them into a silk-like mask, and I put it on. The mask reshaped itself into Zhao Zhang's face. I took his clothes, told 3796 to burn the body, and watched a flamethrower extend from its hand and turn him to ash. I told the corpse I would handle his revenge if it was not too inconvenient, and we walked into Autumn Leaf Town. The town was a medieval mess. Mud roads full of holes, livestock excrement in the streets, and worn-out buildings that looked worse than rural China. The people were almost entirely East Asian, which was strange because Zhao Jiang's memories told me the whole subcontinent was dominated by Westerners, and Easterners were a marginalized minority. 3 generations earlier, his ancestor had crossed the ocean, served the local monarch as a great knight, and earned the title that let him bring in a population of fellow Easterners to clear the land. At the castle, I was greeted by an old man named Liu, the family butler who had served 2 generations of barons. I asked him how much money the castle had, and he told me 456 gold coins. By local exchange, that was a small fortune. I told him to set aside 100 for emergencies and spend the rest on iron ore. He hesitated and explained the problem. Autumn Leaf produced no iron. The nearest source was Blackrock Town, and Blackrock Town's Baron Kirov was a sworn enemy of the family who would mark up the price the moment he saw us buying in bulk. I dug through Zhao Zhang's memories for the name. Baron Kirov was a client of a Viscount Harley in the regional capital, and between the two of them they had been carving slices off the Zhao family's territory for years. Given the timing, Kirov was the most likely person to have ordered Zhao Zhang killed. That made him more useful. not less. I told Leo to send word to Kirov that I had developed an interest in a woman named Miss Sissy in the Giant Stone City, that I wanted to redeem her, and that I needed to borrow 5,000 gold coins with Autumn Leaf Town as collateral. Kirov ran a usury business and would not be able to resist. Lee went pale. He told me the monthly interest was 4% compounded, that we could not possibly service the loan, and that the town would be lost. I told him I had my own reasons, and that he should do as I said. He aged about a decade in front of me, bowed, and left to make the arrangements. Baron Kirov got my message the same day. According to what I pieced together later, he was pleased and confused in equal measure. Pleased because Autumn Leaf Town falling into his hands was exactly what he had been working toward for years, and confused because he had already paid an organization called the Black Scorpion 500 gold coins to assassinate Zhao Zhang, and had been told the job was done. He decided he had been cheated, then decided it did not matter. He sent his butler Jerry back to me with an offer of only 2,500 gold coins, on the grounds that Autumn Leaf Town was not worth more than that, at 4% monthly interest, to be repaid in full in 2 months. The terms were designed to be impossible. He expected to own the town by the end of summer. While that was being arranged, I had time to take stock of my new life. Being a minor aristocrat in a backwards world was significantly worse than being a normal person in a modern one. There was no television, no internet, and no carbonated drinks. Breakfast was white bread and potato soup. Lunch was white bread and potato soup. And dinner was white bread and meat broth. My digestive system was complaining within a few days, although I admit the peasants in the town were eating black bread and water, so the comparison favored me. I had the authority to summon any unmarried woman in town to my bed, but there were only a few dozen young women in Autumn Leaf, and none of them were memorable. Zhao Jiang had been single for the same reason. I spent my actual time in the Badlands north of town. I told 3796 to start manufacturing, and it offered me a list of everything in its database. I told it to put energy first and start with 100 solar umbrellas. It went outside, broke down a pile of iron ore with blue light, recombined the materials, and produced a solar umbrella in about 30 minutes. Then another. By the end of the first day, there were 48. By the end of the second, there were 96. And on the third day, the first engineering robot appeared next to 3,796, 3 meters tall, and equipped with 16 mechanical arms. After that, the curve steepened. The engineering robots tripled each day, while the umbrellas climbed by the hundred. By day 9, factories were going up in the Badlands fast enough that the noise was constant. By day 10, there were 2,000 solar umbrellas in operation in a full industrial complex where there had been nothing but useless stone. When I walked up to the gate, 2 guards knelt and greeted me in matching mechanical voices. They were not human, although they looked close enough. I ignored them and walked through to the largest factory. Inside, there was a metal sphere suspended in the air, extending mechanical tentacles down to the assembly lines and putting together robots one after another. As they came off the line, each one walked itself to another factory to work as a laborer refining metal and producing components. The whole operation was self-replicating and self-staffing. 3796 came up to me, and I asked for a status report. It told me there were 378 production robots running, and another 500 could come online within a day if I wanted them. The only constraint was iron ore. We were going to run out, and soon. Iron ore was the bottleneck. 3796 could synthesize matter directly out of energy if it had to, but the energy cost was absurd, so in practice, everything still required raw material. I had been buying ore from every merchant willing to make the trip and stripping the town's iron tools, and it was not even close to enough. I told 3796 we needed to start producing combat units, since expanding our territory was going to require force. It pulled up its catalog. The options came in pairs. Bladed robots with 8 super alloy arms, gunner robots loaded with Vulcan cannons, artillery robots with rocket launchers, shielded robots with energy shields, all available in a full version that cost 800 kun and rated as combat level 7, or a stripped-down version at 20 kun and combat level 6. There were also small reconnaissance satellites, reconnaissance flies, liquid metal robots, helicopters, supersonic fighters, heavy bombers, and a heavy carrier. Everything topped out at level 7. That seemed low. From the data 3796 had downloaded into my head when I took the inheritance, I knew there were weapons in its database that made level 7 look like nothing. I asked why we could not produce anything stronger. 3796 explained that its current synthesis ceiling was 100 kun of energy per component. Level 8 units and above required individual components that cost more than that to make, so they were simply out of reach. There were 3 ways around the cap. We could build a fortified stronghold with a large-scale matter converter that could upgrade materials in bulk. We could find naturally occurring higher-grade materials, or we could keep expanding our industrial base until our technology level caught up on its own. I looked at the stronghold specifications. The Mobile fortified stronghold was 3 kilometers across, level 10 in combat rating, and required 10,000 tons of steel, 100,000 kun of energy, and 1 unit of something called dimensional crystals. By my math, the steel alone would cost around 60,000 gold coins on the open market, which was more than a century of Autumn Leaf Town's income. The energy requirement would take 50,000 days at our current absorption rate, and I had no idea what a dimensional crystal even was. I gave up on the stronghold for the moment and asked for simplified versions of the bladed, gunner, and artillery robots instead. My enemies were medieval. They had no firearms, no shielding, and no armor that mattered. The full models were absurd overkill. I told 3796 to drop the bladed robots down to 2 blades, just sharp enough to cut through a night, swap the Vulcan cannons for 12.5mm heavy machine guns, reduce the artillery to a single 120mm piece, cut the combat radius to 200 kilometers, and shrink everything to roughly human size. If possible, I wanted them coated in human-looking skin so they could pass. 3796 redesigned them on the spot. Each simplified unit came out as a 1.8-meter, 600-kilogram robot with a small movement furnace, rated at combat level 4, and costing only 1/10 of a kun to produce. The price drop was enormous. I told 3796 to make 1 of each immediately, as my personal bodyguards, and then 100 of each after that. The 3 bodyguards came off the line that day. They stood in front of me in human form, wearing black cloaks and dark sunglasses, with the bladed unit carrying 2 super alloy blades on its back, the gunner unit carrying 2 heavy machine guns, and the artillery unit carrying a single 120mm cannon. I will admit, I enjoyed the moment more than I should have. 3 Terminators as personal bodyguards was the kind of thing no head of state on Earth could match. 3796 pointed out that the human form was a serious downgrade. The bladed robot's original design was an 8-armed beast, and forcing it into humanoid proportions cost it somewhere between 20 and 120% of its combat capacity. I told it that did not matter, because I was operating in a human society, and humanoid robots were practical in ways that beast-shaped ones were not. While we were on the subject of capabilities, I asked 3796 to run the numbers on my own cultivation. Zhao Zhang's family martial art was called the Thunder Ox art, and in theory, it could be cultivated all the way to Great Knight. I wanted to know how long that would take with an optimized training method that 3796 designed for me. It cost 1/10 of a kun and 20 seconds of deduction, and the answer was insulting. With its optimized method, I would reach Junior Warrior in 2 years, Intermediate Warrior in 5, and Advanced Warrior in 10. The Knight rank was unreachable. There were 2 problems. The first was that I had missed the optimal age window of 9 to 16. The second was that my cultivation aptitude was, in 3796's exact phrasing, that of an extreme waste. It then tried to make me feel better by explaining that after several millennia of degradation, all humans on Earth were extreme wastes by Xizu standards, and I was not alone in this. I admit it did help, slightly. I asked if there was a workaround. There was. A list of treasures with names like Star River Golden Flower and 7-colored amethyst fruit could promote me directly to a level 10 powerhouse and upgrade my aptitude in the process, at which point knights could be killed with a casual slap. The Xizu themselves had no cultivation methods, because they were soul forms permanently merged with robot bodies and were effectively immortal as long as any robot carried their soul brand. 3796 took the opportunity to offer me a merger, on the grounds that I could live forever distributed across any robot I owned. I told it we could talk about that later. I had a goose that laid golden eggs sitting in front of me. Becoming the goose was not on my agenda yet. I had a bad feeling about the treasures, and I was right to. Producing them required a level 7 mobile fortified stronghold, and the material requirements for each consecutive stronghold level scaled geometrically. I had never even heard of half the materials involved. I set the treasures aside and ordered a level 5 liquid metal robot instead, with reduced weight and reinforced armor when transformed. It cost 20 kun, which meant taking priority over the next batch of simplified bladed robots. I told 3796 to make the liquid metal one first. While that was being built, things were happening outside town that I was not yet aware of. According to what I learned afterward, Peasants were working the fields east of Autumn Leaf when a column of fully armed cavalry in black cloaks came riding in from the horizon. Someone recognized them as the Black Wind Bandits, and within minutes the fields were empty and the town's alarm was ringing. The castle officer on duty was screaming at the guards to close the gate before he finished closing it himself. Butler Liu found me in the garden, pale and shaking, and told me the Black Wind Bandits had arrived. Liu explained the situation on the way up to the wall. The Black Wind Bandits were a cavalry-only group that operated around the giant stone city, fast, organized, and difficult to corner. The local government had tried to wipe them out several times and failed, because their leader, Barry, was a full knight. In this world, knight was the rank where a martial artist had broken past the limits of the mortal body. A standard one could swing a 200-kilogram weapon as though it weighed nothing, and in full armor was effectively a walking tank. Autumn Leaf Town did not have a single knight. Our strongest fighter was the guard commander Zhao En, an intermediate warrior, which meant that without the wall in the way, Barry could have killed every person in the castle by himself. Most knights got recruited by greater aristocrats, but the ones who turned bandit were the worst kind of problem. While Liu was talking, he kept glancing at the 4 bodyguards I had brought with me. The liquid metal unit had finished production and was walking with the others. 4 strange armed men returning with the Baron from a trip was the kind of thing that would normally generate a lot of gossip in a closed town like Autumn Leaf. But with bandits at the gate, he had the sense not to ask. From the top of the wall, I could see over 100 cloaked cavalry approaching on first-rate war mounts. Barry was at the front in heavy armor, riding a wildebeest. Our defenders amounted to 36 men, including 10 archers, 8 junior warriors, and Zhao En. They were adequate for keeping order in a quiet town. Against this, they were nothing. Most of them were visibly shaking, and only the 6-meter wall was keeping them in position at all. The bandits reached the base of the wall, dismounted, and stood behind Barry while he drew an enormous sword off his back and walked at us like he was going for a stroll. Zhao En screamed for the archers to release. 10 arrows flew, 9 missed, and the 10th glanced off Barry's shoulder armor and bounced. He kept walking. The second volley did not touch him at all. I will say this for the man. Watching a heavily armored knight cross open ground through a volley of arrows without breaking stride was genuinely impressive. Then he took 1 step at the base of the wall and jumped straight to the top. He landed next to one of our guards, cut him in half, and the rest of the line broke and scattered. The bandits below started cheering his name. Barry waved a hand and dropped ropes off the wall so they could climb up and join him. Liu's legs were giving out next to me. He told me we should run. I told him no. Knight survived a bullet to the chest, drew a 9mm pistol from my belt, and fired 6 rounds into Barry. The bullets punched straight through his armor and put 6 bleeding holes in him. Barry stayed standing. He started screaming about yellow-skinned dogs and how he was going to grind my bones to powder. And then his eyes went red, and his body forced all 6 bullets back out through the holes they had come in through. The bullets came out of him on their own. All 6 of them pushed out through the original holes. I was impressed. I had never seen a human do that before, and I revised my respect for the local power scale on the spot. From Zhao Jiang's memories, I already knew Knight was only the first rank past mortal capability. Above that came Great Knight, Earth Knight, and Sky Knight. And above all of those were the warlocks who sat at the top of this world. If a basic knight could shrug off 6 rounds, the higher tiers were going to be a problem someday. Barry recovered, drew his great sword, and charged me. I told the bladed robot to go and trade blows with him, but to leave the head intact. It moved faster than Barry could track, drew both super alloy blades, and went straight in. Barry got his sword up in time to parry the first strike, but the impact drove him back several steps, and blood started running out from under his armor. He looked at the robot and demanded to know how a minor baron like Zhao Jiang could possibly afford a knight as a bodyguard. From the bits I had inherited from Zhao Jiang's memories, supporting a knight cost something like 30 gold coins a month plus the 400 gold armor, which was completely beyond our family. He had reason to be confused. The bladed robot kept attacking. Barry could keep up only by burning through what he called his life force, and even then, he was losing ground. While that was happening, the bandit vice leader at the base of the wall was yelling at his men that anyone who got over the top would be free to loot and kill for 3 days. They started climbing the ropes Barry had dropped. I told the gunner robot to clear them out. It walked to the edge of the wall, leveled both 12.5mm heavy machine guns over the side, and opened up. The first bandit's head burst. The second lost an arm. The third had his chest punched through. Bullets went through cloth and chainmail and bodies without distinguishing between them, and the bandits had no way to respond to a hail of metal coming down on them. The vice leader screamed for a retreat and was torn apart mid-sentence. The entire force of over 100 riders was dead in under 3 minutes. Resisting automatic fire with a body is something history has settled. Barry started screaming at me to give him back his brothers. I told the gunner robot to go ahead. It turned the machine guns on him and put enough rounds into him to separate his legs from the rest of him. And the bladed robot stepped forward and took his head off cleanly. The guards on the wall stared at me. The knight who had walked through their arrows untouched had just been killed by 2 of my men in under a minute, and the entire bandit force had been reduced to meat below. Liu's hands were shaking. He asked me, in a voice that was half awe and half tears, whether I had become a warlock or an alchemist. I told him I had obtained the power of an alchemist. That was apparently the best news the Zhao family had received in 3 generations. The guards started cheering. Warlocks were the pinnacle of the subcontinent, and even the Fernandro Principality's monarch had to be respectful around one. As followers of an alchemist, the men on the wall had just had their entire futures upgraded. I had the bladed robot bring Barry's head down to the munitions factory and handed it to 3796 to read. The full picture came out a few minutes later. The Black Wind Bandits were not really independent bandits. They were a deniable arm of a man named Earl Lockie, who ruled Tree Mountain City and had been locked in a long-running feud with Viscount Harley. My lone request to Kirov had set off Lockie's alarm, because if Kirov successfully foreclosed on Autumn Leaf Town, he would gain enough power to tilt the local balance further toward Harley. Lockie had decided the cleaner solution was to exterminate the Zhao family outright before that could happen. With the family extinct, the fief would revert to the principality, and Lockie could arrange for a friendlier neighbor to be installed there. So the enemy of my enemy had not been my friend. He had been trying to kill me from a different angle. Without 3796, I would have been a corpse on a wall by sundown without ever knowing why. Black Rock Town was nothing like Autumn Leaf. From what Liu had been able to tell me, it was one of 10 towns under the giant stone city and the wealthiest of them, built on top of several large iron veins and devoted entirely to steel and weapons manufacturing. Its population was 30,000 against our barely 1,000. Its one weakness was food. The land around it could not grow anything, so it had to import constantly, which was the entire reason Kirov had been so determined to absorb our fields. A week later, I was standing on a hillside 2 kilometers outside it with my army. Behind me stood 50 bladed robots, 50 gunner robots, 10 artillery robots, and the 2 level 5 liquid metal units, all in matching black battle gowns. I ordered the assault and split off a strike group of about 60 for the initial push. Then I put on a metallic helmet 3796 had built for me. It was called a consciousness-transmitting helmet, and it linked my mind into any robot equipped with a matching receiver within a 5-kilometer radius. I had no intention of going to a battlefield in person. Before the inheritance, I was so physically weak that an ordinary person could have killed me, and warlocks in this world were capable of making people die in ways that had no obvious cause. Standing on a battlefield in my own body would have been stupid. My consciousness linked to the level 5 liquid metal robot, which warped its surface and reshaped itself into a copy of my face and build. It felt like wearing a second body. Everything responded the way I expected. The only thing missing was sensation. I pinched my own arm hard enough to deform the metal and felt absolutely nothing. 3796 chose this moment to mention through my internal channel that if I built a level 3 mobile fortified stronghold, it could produce flesh liquid metal robots that did transmit sensation, including specifically the feeling of copulation, which it understood humans were fond of. I told it to shut up. The outer gate had 6 guards stationed in front of a 6-meter wall. They saw us coming, rang their alarm, dropped the steel gate, and ran archers up to the top. Around 30 fully equipped archers were lined up by the time we reached effective range. I had the artillery robots step forward and aim their 120mm pieces at the gate. 5 rounds, 5 explosions, and the steel gate came apart while the concussion knocked half the archers off the wall. Somebody up there shouted that we had a warlock, which was apparently a recognized sign of total defeat. The whole line went pale. One of the bladed robots called up the wall and told them to kneel and drop their weapons if they wanted to live. After about a second of hesitation, one archer dropped his bow, and the rest followed in a chain. I left 5 bladed robots to handle the prisoners and walked the rest of the force into the town. The streets were silent. Everyone was inside, staring at us through cracks in their shutters. The real fortification was the inner castle. Black Rock Castle had a wall 10 meters tall and a kilometer across. built entirely from a black stone as hard as steel. Even a knight could not jump that, and a great knight could only manage it by removing his heavy armor first. Over 200 soldiers in leather armor manned the top, and they looked considerably more dangerous than anything Autumn Leaf had ever fielded. The two heavy crossbows mounted on the wall were the part one paid attention to. Each one was 7 meters long, took 5 or 6 men to operate, and according to local reputation could kill a great knight outright on a direct hit. Kirov came up onto the wall himself, bowed deeply, and addressed me as an honorable warlock. He apologized for whatever offense Blackrock might have given me, and offered gold to pacify my anger. In this part of the world, every state required a warlock as official backing, and losing that support tended to mean the end of the state, so the local aristocracy had learned to treat anything that looked like a warlock with extreme caution. I had the liquid metal body drop the disguise and show him Zhao Zhang's face instead. He went white and called my name out loud. Then his survival instincts kicked in, and he reminded me that attacking another baron's territory without cause was a major crime that would cost me my title and my fief if the court ever heard about it. He offered to pretend the entire siege had never happened if I left immediately. He was right about the law. It was the reason he had spent years trying to take Autumn Leaf through assassination and usury instead of attacking it directly. I told him he had sent men to assassinate me, and that today he was going to hell. Then I gave the attack order. 30 gunner robots opened fire on the wall at once. Everyone standing on top of it was torn apart in about 2 seconds, Kirov included. The artillery robots blew the inner gate. The 30 knight-rated bladed robots flooded into the castle, and the rest of the resistance collapsed inside of a few minutes. Without a knight or a warlock to hold the line, ordinary soldiers simply could not slow my legion down at all. After Blackrock fell, I sent mining robots straight into the iron veins. Engineering robots started raising new solar umbrellas across the surrounding badlands and breaking ground on a second munitions factory with proper mining equipment instead of medieval tools. Ore production from the existing mines climbed by more than 100-fold within days. The Autumn Leaf factories finally had enough raw material to run at full capacity, and the daily output of new robots multiplied accordingly. A significant portion of the local population fled toward the giant stone city as soon as they heard Kirov was dead. A normal lord would have panicked at watching that many taxpayers walk off, but my actual revenue base was the robots, and they were not going anywhere. The looting was straightforward. The castle yielded 30,000 gold coins in cash, a large collection of antiques and art, and a stack of property deeds in the giant stone city. Kirov's full estate was apparently worth around 200,000 gold, but most of it was tied up in city real estate and collectibles rather than usable currency. I had 3,796 read his head as well. The memory dump included a knight rank cultivation method, but it was strictly worse than the family Thunderox art, so I set it aside. Micro-reconnaissance satellites went up into the sky over the giant stone city to map what came next. The picture was not encouraging. The city's population was around 600,000. There were over 100 knights in residence. Viscount Harley alone had 30 knights and 3 great knights under his direct command. There were also more than 30 apprentice warlocks living in the city. The power scale from Kirov's memories was useful. An Earth Knight was roughly comparable to a level 3 apprentice warlock. A Sky Knight was comparable to a full level 1 warlock, and Sky Knights essentially did not exist outside the personal retinues of the strongest warlocks. The entire Fernandro Principality had more than 10,000 knights and exactly 1 Sky Knight. My mechanical legion could grind through every mortal force the giant stone city could field. The problem was that the city was backed by a warlock group called the Black Cottage, which possessed a level 1 warlock of its own. A level 1 warlock in this world could ride into the middle of an army, kill the enemy commander, and collapse the morale of an entire campaign in a single stroke. My main combat units were still level 4. Once I could replace them with level 6 units, I had complete confidence I could kill a level 1 warlock. Until then, the only requirement was to keep building. Every day my forces multiplied, and Blackrock's ore meant the curve was now nearly vertical. Time was on my side. While my factories were ramping, things were moving against me in the giant stone city that I would only learn about later. Viscount Harley called the patriarchs of the 4 great families that ran the city alongside him to a meeting and informed them that Kirov was dead. None of them were inclined to retaliate on their own. Every one of those families maintained at least an apprentice warlock as a household retainer, and they all understood that crossing a real official warlock was the kind of mistake that erased families. As long as I did not threaten their core interests, they would have been content to leave me alone. Harley wanted to hire the Black Cottage to kill me, The patriarchs questioned whether I was actually a warlock at all. He had reasoned out that I was only an apprentice. A real official warlock would not need 100 soldiers to take a town. And more importantly, a real official warlock would never have killed an aristocrat without cause, since aristocrats tended to have their own warlock patrons, and killing them carelessly was effectively a declaration of war between warlocks. By unwritten rule, official warlocks respected each other's people. Apprentices got no such protection. Only an inexperienced upstart who had just come into power would behave the way I had. The Black Cottage's fee for handling that kind of upstart was 50,000 gold coins. Harley pulled 30,000 from the year's taxes, committed 10 of his own, and assessed the 4 families 2,500 each, with the spoils to be split proportionally afterward. The request was delivered through a talking white raven named Bobo, who lived in the garden behind Harley's mansion and demanded a roasted pork ham as payment for the round trip. The Black Cottage itself was not hidden away in some remote location. It operated openly out of the Black City 100 kilometers north, a place twice the size of Giant Stone with a population of 200,000. And its headquarters was a manor large enough to occupy a full third of the city. The Black Cottage operated out of a 60-meter warlock tower built from a material called steel rock, which was as hard as steel and could be enchanted by warlocks to gain additional properties. A brick of it cost more than a gold coin, and the tower itself had reportedly cost upward of 10 million to construct. The towers were not vanity projects. They concentrated elemental particles that accelerated cultivation, could be used to manipulate local weather, and let a level 1 warlock with enough apprentices defending it stand against a level 2 attacker. A level 3 apprentice warlock named Zorro received Bobo's message in the garden, where he was arguing with a cat-faced flower that wanted honey water instead of plain. He carried the news up to the 3rd floor of the tower and reported to his teacher Bunny, a level 1 warlock and the master of the Black Cottage. Bunny ordered 3 of his level 3 apprentices, along with several level 2s, to ride for the Giant Stone City. That much firepower was enough to defeat an ordinary army of 1,000 on its own. The cavalry arrived 3 days later, attended a banquet, rested a day, and on the 3rd day, the Giant Stone City sent a full expedition out toward Black Rock. The column included 2,000 elite soldiers, 5,000 auxiliaries with the supply train, a heavy cavalry contingent of 50 riders strong enough to kill a level 3 apprentice warlock, and roughly a dozen apprentice warlocks in the center next to the command officer. I watched the entire procession leave the city from the new command center at Black Rock.